Elian trudges through the frozen wastelands of the northern reach, his once gleaming ancestral sword, Frostmourne, now dulled and cracked in his hand. The bitter winds cut through his tattered blades-worn cloak as he reflects on the massacre at Ravenspire, where his brothers in arms fell to the eternal winter's forces. Blood trails behind him in the snow from wounds that refuse to heal, a constant reminder of his failure to protect his order. When night falls, Elian makes camp beneath a dead tree and examines ancient scrolls detailing the location of Aethelgard, birthplace of the first Bladesworn. He falls into fitful sleep, haunted by visions of his fallen brothers calling him a coward for surviving when they did not. A flashback reveals the catastrophic battle at Ravenspire 3 weeks prior. Elian watches in horror as the Winter King's frost wraiths descend upon the Bladesworn fortress, their enchanted blades powerless against the ancient cold magic. His mentor, Lord Commander Thorn, orders Elian to flee with Frostmourne while the others make their final stand. The memory shifts to Elian kneeling before the dying Thorn, who whispers of Aethelgard and the rite of reawakening before frost consumes his heart. In the present, Elian awakens to find spectral frost wolves circling his camp. He draws Frostmourne, but the blade emits only the faintest blue glow before the wolves attack. Elian barely survives the encounter, suffering a deep wound to his side that begins to crystallize with frost. With renewed urgency, he continues his journey toward the mountains where Aethelgard awaits. Elian arrives at a small frontier village being terrorized by the Winter King's scouts. Though weakened, he intervenes when frost-touched raiders attack a family. Frostmourne fails him again, barely cutting through the simplest armor. After a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, Elian defeats the raiders but collapses from his wounds. He's taken in by Karina, a village healer with knowledge of the old ways. As she treats his frost-infected wounds, she recognizes the sword's markings and reveals her grandfather once aided the Bladesworn. Elian confesses his plan to reach Aethelgard and restore the sword's power. Karina warns him that the ancient temple demands a terrible price, but Elian resolves to continue his journey, driven by guilt and the memory of his fallen brothers. Before leaving, he teaches the villagers basic defensive techniques against the frost creatures, accepting his role as the last Bladesworn. In the foothills of the Ashen Mountains, Elian encounters Morvain, an ancient hermit living in a cave adorned with Bladesworn symbols. Initially hostile, Morvain attacks Elian with surprising strength for his apparent age. Upon seeing Frostmourne, Morvain relents and reveals himself as the last keeper of Aethelgard's secrets, sworn to test any who seek the temple. Morvain explains that he was once a Bladesworn who abandoned the order after discovering the true nature of their power. He reluctantly agrees to guide Elian through the treacherous mountain pass, but warns that what awaits in Aethelgard might break him more thoroughly than any physical wound. That night, Morvain performs an ancient ritual over Frostmourne, temporarily stabilizing its failing magic and revealing glimpses of the sword's bloody history through the centuries. Elian begins to question the honorable legacy he believed in, as Morvain's ritual shows how the blade has fed on its wielder's suffering rather than their nobility. As Elian and Morvain journey higher into the mountains, Elian shares the full story of his past: his orphaning during the Winter King's first assault on the lowlands, his adoption into the Bladesworn at age 7, and his rise through the ranks under Lord Commander Thorn's harsh tutelage. He reveals his deep-seated fear that he survived Ravenspire not through skill, but through cowardice, having hesitated at a crucial moment that might have saved his brothers. Morvain listens silently before sharing his own tale of disillusionment with the Order. Their conversation is interrupted when they're ambushed by Rime-Frost hunters, elite assassins of the Winter King who have been tracking Elian since Ravenspire. During the ensuing battle, Morvain demonstrates forbidden frost magic, revealing himself as a former battle mage who was excommunicated from the Bladesworn. Though they defeat the hunters, Morvain is severely wounded, and Elian must carry him through a blizzard as the old man's life fades, guided only by cryptic directions to Aethelgard's hidden entrance. With Morvain barely clinging to life, Elian finally reaches the hidden entrance to Aethelgard, a massive ice wall carved with the history of the Bladesworn. Using Frostmourne, even in its weakened state, Elian cuts his palm and smears blood across the ice, activating ancient runes that cause the wall to shatter inward. Beyond lies a vast underground temple complex, its architecture unlike anything in the known world. As they enter, Morvain reveals that he was once Aethelgard's guardian before he fled his duties, unable to bear witnessing another Bladesworn break under the temple's truth. Inside, they find evidence that others have recently passed through, followers of the Winter King seeking the temple's power. Morvain guides Elian to a chamber where healing waters flow, saving the old man's life, but leaving him too weak to continue immediately. While Morvain recovers, Elian explores the outer chambers of the temple, discovering murals depicting the first Bladesworn, not as a noble hero as legend claimed, but as a grief-stricken warrior making a terrible pact with entities of frost and shadow. Partially recovered, Morvain explains the true nature of the rite of reawakening. Elian must journey alone through 3 trials within Aethelgard's inner sanctum, each designed to strip away his illusions about the Bladesworn and himself. The sword Frostmourne doesn't draw power from honor or righteousness, as the Order's teachings claim, but from the wielder's deepest suffering and sacrifice. Before Elian enters the sanctum, Morvain gives him a vial of memory-preserving elixir, explaining that many who complete the rite choose to forget what they learn within. Elian enters the first trial chamber, where he finds a pool of black water. Upon touching it, he's plunged into a vision of the Order's founding, witnessing the first Bladesworn, Ethel himself, sacrifice his beloved to create the first Frostblade. The vision reveals that all Bladesworn swords are forged, not through honor, but through profound loss, each requiring a sacrifice of what the wielder loves most. Elian emerges from the vision shaken, his faith in the Order's principles beginning to crumble as Frostmourne pulses slightly stronger in response to his emotional turmoil. In the second trial chamber, Elian faces a hall of ice mirrors that show not his reflection, but the faces of those who died at Ravenspire. Each mirror forces him to relive the death of a specific brother-in-arms, experiencing their final moments from their perspective. Through these visions, Elian learns that his hesitation at Ravenspire wasn't cowardice, but a moment of clarity. He alone had sensed something wrong about how eagerly Lord Commander Thorn led them into battle. The mirrors reveal that Thorn had made a secret pact with the Winter King, sacrificing the Order to increase his own power, but his plan backfired. Elian's survival wasn't chance, but Thorn's final attempt at redemption, recognizing too late the corruption in his own heart. As the truth of this betrayal washes over Elian, Frostmourne grows colder in his grip, feeding on his anguish. When he tries to reject this revelation, the mirrors begin to crack, and frost wraiths emerge from them. Only by accepting the painful truth does Elian survive, the wraiths dissipating as he embraces his grief rather than denying it. Elian enters the final chamber, a vast circular room with a frozen pool at its center, beneath a dome that reveals the night sky. Here, a spectral guardian materializes, Ethel himself, the first Bladesworn, now a being of ice and regret. Ethel explains that the Bladesworn were never meant to be an order of many, but a solitary burden passed down through generations. The proliferation of frost blades weakened the original magic, making them vulnerable to the Winter King's power. To restore Frostmourne to its full strength, Elian must place what he loves most into the frozen pool. Not a physical sacrifice, but the surrender of his most cherished belief. Elian realizes that despite everything, he still clings to the ideal of the Bladesworn Brotherhood, to the belief that their sacrifice at Ravenspire had meaning. With devastating clarity, he understands that he must abandon this comforting falsehood and accept that their deaths were meaningless, the result of manipulation and lies. As he mentally relinquishes this last comfort, Elian plunges Frostmourne into the pool. The ice cracks throughout the chamber, and the blade emerges transformed, glowing with frigid blue light that responds to Elian's newfound anguish and disillusionment. Ethel's spirit reveals the final truth. Frostmourne and all Bladesworn weapons draw their power directly from their wielder's suffering. The greater the wielder's anguish, the more powerful the blade becomes. This is why the Bladesworn were always taught to endure hardship without complaint, not as a test of character, but as fuel for their weapons. Elian, now understanding the true cost, must decide whether to embrace this power or reject it. Outside the inner sanctum, Morvayn senses the completion of the ritual and prepares to offer Elian the memory elixir, giving him the choice to forget the terrible truths he has learned. Before Elian can emerge, however, the temple shakes violently. The Winter King's forces, led by his lieutenant Kaelis, have tracked them to Aethelgard and begun a ritual to corrupt the temple's power source. Morvayn is captured, and Elian, still within the inner sanctum, feels the temple's magic begin to warp around him. With Frostmourne restored, but his spirit shattered, Elian must quickly decide whether to flee with his reforged blade or confront the invaders with his newfound power, a power he now knows comes at the cost of his own suffering.